You walk out on a hot June afternoon and see your hydrangea drooping and limp. Every leaf is hanging down as if it is begging for water, and you do the most natural, caring thing in the world. You give it more water. That one act of kindness can be the very thing that quietly kills it. Here is what almost nobody tells you. A hydrangea wilting in the heat of the afternoon is very often perfectly fine. Leave it alone, and it will stand back up on its own by evening. But if you read that wilt as thirst and keep pouring on water day after day, you drown the roots. The soil turns to airless mud, the roots begin to rot, and unlike a plant that is simply hot, this one does not bounce back. That is mistake number 3, and it is the one that kills the plant. Here is the cruelest part of all. The signs of too much water and too little water look almost exactly the same. A drooping, yellowing, sad hydrangea can be screaming for a drink, or it can be drowning. And if you guess wrong, you lose it. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how to tell the difference in about 10 seconds. So here's the deal. 5 mistakes. 5 things you must never do to a hydrangea in June, because June is the month that decides your entire summer. June is when the heat arrives, when the big blooms open, and when the plant is most vulnerable to the wrong kind of love. By the end of this video, you are going to know exactly what those 5 mistakes are, exactly why each one wrecks the plant on a biological level, and exactly what to do instead with the amounts, the timing, and the methods spelled out. Not vague advice, the actual fix. But first, let me tell you why June is the month that decides everything. 5 mistakes, 5 things you must never do to a hydrangea in June. Because June is the hinge the whole season swings on. June is when the heat arrives, when the first big flush of flowers opens, and when this plant is at its most vulnerable to a well-meaning gardener doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. In June, one wrong move stops being a small problem and becomes a lost season of blooms or a lost plant entirely. Before we start, do me one favor. Drop a comment and tell me what state you are watching from, and if you know your USDA growing zone, put that in too. I am asking because where you live changes everything here. A gardener in Zone 5 up north and a gardener in Zone 8 down south are fighting 2 completely different battles in June. One is coaxing a plant through cool late springs. The other is watching the same plant collapse under a brutal afternoon sun. And it matters more with hydrangeas than almost any other shrub because the hot sun south and the humid southeast change the rules the most. So throughout this video, I'm going to keep coming back to 2 American frameworks: the USDA hardiness zones in your regional climate, the South, the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, New England, the mountain states in the Pacific Northwest. So when I call out yours, pay attention because that is the version of the advice written for your backyard. Now, mistake number 1. Mistake number 1 is planting your hydrangea in the wrong spot, in too much sun. You picked a bright, sunny location because more sun means more flowers, right? That is true for a lot of plants. With most hydrangeas, it is exactly backwards. And now the leaves are scorching brown and crispy at the edges. The whole plant curls and wilts every single afternoon, and the blooms fade almost as fast as they open. Here is the part almost everyone gets wrong. For most hydrangeas, and especially the classic big leaf type with the big blue and pink mophead flowers, full sun is not the solution. It is the problem. Here is the biology, because once you understand it, you will never make this mistake again. Big leaf hydrangeas have large, thin leaves and a shallow root system. In strong, direct sun, those big leaves lose water faster than the roots can possibly pull it up from the soil. And wherever the water cannot reach in time, that tissue simply dries out and dies. That is the brown, crispy scorch you are seeing. These plants did not evolve in an open field. They evolved on the shaded floor of a forest, getting gentle morning light and shelter from the harsh sun of the day. Now here is the exception that proves why this matters. Panicle hydrangeas, the kind with the cone-shaped white flowers, like the popular limelight, genuinely do tolerate full sun. So knowing which type you actually have changes everything. So here is your fix. Plant big leaf and oak leaf hydrangeas where they get morning sun and afternoon shade. Avoid the hot west-facing spots that take the full force of the late-day sun. For a plant that is already struggling out there right now, do not dig it up in this heat. Instead, give it some relief with a shade cloth through the worst afternoon hours and plan to move it in the fall when the weather cools. And lay down 2 to 3 inches of mulch to keep the roots cool and the moisture even. One regional note: if you garden in the south or out in the mountain west, where the afternoon sun is simply brutal, even the so-called sun-loving hydrangeas will struggle in it. Lean toward more afternoon shade than you think you need. And the bonus: get the spot right and you also stop that daily afternoon wilt, which means you stop panicking and reaching for the hose, which brings us straight to feeding. Mistake number 2 is feeding your hydrangea too much nitrogen. This is the mistake that feels like love. You want a big, lush hydrangea absolutely covered in flowers, so you feed it rich, all-purpose fertilizer, the bright blue stuff, generously all season long. And what you get is an enormous, dark green, leafy bush with hardly a flower on it. Here is what is happening inside. Fertilizer has 3 main numbers on the bag, and the first one is nitrogen. Nitrogen drives green, leafy growth. Flowering, on the other hand, leans on the other 2, phosphorus and potassium. So when you flood a hydrangea with high nitrogen feed, it does exactly what you are telling it to do. It pours all its energy into making leaves at the direct expense of making blooms. And worse, all that soft, lush growth is more easily stressed and more likely to wilt in the heat. The University of Maryland Extension is clear about this. Hydrangeas fertilized too heavily with high nitrogen fertilizer can actually flower less. So here is your fix. Switch to a balanced fertilizer, one with even numbers, or one formulated specifically for hydrangeas, or even one higher in phosphorus, the middle number that supports blooming. Bone meal is a good natural source of phosphorus, and apply it in spring, not heavily through the summer. Now here is the honest part, because you deserve it straight. Many established hydrangeas growing in decent soil barely need feeding at all. A simple layer of compost worked in around the base is often all they want. When it comes to feeding this plant, restraint beats generosity almost every time. And the bonus reason to back off the nitrogen is the same thread running through this whole video. Over-fertilizing is just one more thing that leaves a plant soft, stressed, and quick to wilt when the heat comes. Quick, honest note before the big one. If you are finding this useful, subscribing is simply the thing that tells YouTube to keep sending it your way. One click and you keep getting this every week. That is the whole pitch. Now, mistake number 3. This is the one in the title. This is the one that kills the plant. And the cruelest part is that you do it precisely because you care. Remember the scene from the very start? The hydrangea drooping in the heat. You watered it, and it collapsed anyway. Here is exactly how that happens and exactly how to tell it, apart from simple thirst before it is too late. Here is the trap. Hydrangeas love water. The very name comes from the Greek for water, so it feels almost impossible to give one too much. But you can, and when you do, it is lethal. Here is the biology. Roots do not just need water, they need air. There are tiny pockets of oxygen in healthy soil, and the roots breathe through them. When you keep the soil constantly soggy, water fills every one of those air pockets, and the roots can no longer get any oxygen at all. They begin to suffocate. And in that drowning, airless, waterlogged soil, water molds and rot move in and take over. They turn firm, healthy, white roots into brown, soft, foul-smelling mush. And here is the part that fools everyone. Up at the top, a plant with rotting, suffocating roots looks like a plant that is thirsty. It yellows, it wilts, even though the soil is soaking wet. So you look at the wilt, you assume it needs a drink, and you water it again. You are pouring water onto a plant that is already drowning. So here is the single most important test in this entire video, the one that tells you the difference in about 10 seconds. A hydrangea that wilts in the afternoon heat but stands back up by evening is fine. It does not need more water. That is just the plant coping with the heat, and it recovers on its own once things cool down. But a hydrangea that stays wilted overnight, that is still flopped over at dawn in soil that is wet, is showing you root rot. That is not thirst, that is drowning. So before you ever reach for the hose, push your finger 2 or 3 inches down into the soil. If it is bone dry down there, water deeply. If it is wet or soggy, stop. Whatever is wrong, more water is not the answer. And here is the cruel detail. By the time the plant is staying wilted overnight, the roots are already badly damaged. So you are racing the clock. So here is the rescue. The moment you suspect root rot, stop watering completely and let that soil dry out. If the hydrangea is in a pot, slide it out. Rinse the roots gently under the tap, and with clean scissors, cut away every brown, soft, mushy root, keeping only the firm, pale, healthy ones. Then repot it in fresh, well-draining soil in a pot that actually has drainage holes. If it is in the ground, you need to improve the drainage and never let it sit in a low spot where water pools. Then, prevention, so you never come back here. Water deeply, but only when the top inch or two of soil has gone dry. Use that finger test every single time instead of watering on a fixed daily schedule. Plant in soil that is rich but drains well, never in a boggy low corner of the yard. And mulch to keep the moisture even, so the plant never swings between flooded and bone dry. And here is the honest truth no product label will tell you. The only permanent cure for this is the discipline to check the soil before you water. Every time. Your finger is the best tool you own. Let me ask you something because mistake 3 gets so many people. Have you ever lost a hydrangea that you watered faithfully, watched it wilt and yellow and die no matter how much you gave it and never understood why? Tell me in the comments what happened. Half the time the story is root rot and the person was loving the plant to death. Mistake number 4 is pruning your hydrangea at the wrong time of year. You tidied it up, you cut it back to keep it neat and shapely, maybe last fall, maybe this spring, and now you have a perfectly healthy, lush green bush that simply refuses to flower. And here is what I want you to hear first. You did not do anything wrong as a gardener. You just cut at the wrong moment. Here is the symptom: a strong, healthy plant, plenty of leaves, few or no blooms, and the biology behind it is the single most common reason a hydrangea fails to flower: pruning at the wrong time for its particular type. To understand this, you only need one idea. Old wood versus new wood. Some hydrangeas bloom on old wood. That means the big leaf, mop heads, and lace caps, the oak leaf types, the mountain and climbing hydrangeas. These plants grow their stems 1 year and then set their flower buds on those same stems in late summer and fall to bloom the following year. So the buds for this summer's flowers were formed last autumn, and they have been sitting on those stems all winter waiting. If you cut those stems back in fall, in winter or in spring, you are slicing off this year's flowers before they ever get the chance to open. Other hydrangeas bloom on new wood, the panicle types with the cone-shaped flowers like limelight and the smooth types like Annabelle. These bloom on the growth they put out this very season. So they are pruned in late winter or early spring, and they are far more forgiving. And the rebloomers, like the Endless Summer series, bloom on both, which is why they are the most forgiving of all. So here is why June matters. For the old wood types, June is not for cutting, June is for enjoying the blooms. The only thing you should be doing now is deadheading the spent, faded flowers and snipping out any clearly dead stems. So here is your fix. Identify your type first. Keep the plant tag or use the simple tell. Mop head and oak leaf bloom on old wood. The cone-shaped panicle and smooth types bloom on new wood. If you have an old wood type and it needs real shaping, do it right after it finishes flowering and before about the middle of July, so it has time to set next year's buds. And when in doubt this June, do not cut, just deadhead. The bonus here is enormous. One correctly timed cut or one well-timed decision to leave the shears in the shed is the entire difference between a wall of flowers and a bush that just sits there green. Now the last mistake, and it brings us right back to where we started with that wilting plant in the heat. Mistake number 5 is panicking when your hydrangea wilts in the afternoon heat and reaching for the hose. You did everything right: good spot, balanced feeding, careful pruning. And then the first real heat wave hits. Your hydrangea wilts dramatically by 2 on us in the afternoon, looking like it is dying right in front of you, and your hand goes straight for the hose. Here is the truth. A hydrangea wilting in peak afternoon heat is usually not a watering emergency at all. It is the plant protecting itself. Here is the biology. When the air is hot and dry, those big leaves lose water faster than the roots can pull it up. no matter how moist the soil is. So the plant does something smart. It temporarily wilts, drooping its leaves to reduce the surface area exposed to the sun, to slow that water loss and ride out the worst of the day. If the soil is moist and the plant perks back up by evening, nothing is wrong. And if you respond to that normal afternoon wilt by pouring on more water, you push the plant straight toward the root rot we just talked about in mistake 3. So here is your fix, and it is mostly about restraint. First, check the soil before you water. Push your finger 2 or 3 inches down, bone dry, water deeply. Still moist, leave it alone. It will recover at dusk. Second, when you do water, water deeply and infrequently at the base of the plant in the early morning. Soak the root zone well rather than giving a shallow daily sprinkle that only wets the surface and keeps the roots up high where they dry out fastest. Aim for that 1 to 2 inches of water a week. Third, lay down 2 to 3 inches of mulch to hold moisture in the soil and keep the roots cool. And fourth, for a plant getting too much sun, give it that afternoon shade. The very same fix from mistake 1. Once you understand that afternoon wilt is normal and that the plant often fixes itself, the weight lifts. You stop panic watering. You stop blaming yourself. And you let the plant do exactly what it evolved to do. It is patience, not panic. One regional note: if you garden in the South or the Mountain West, that afternoon droop is just the daily rhythm of summer. Do not let it send you to the hose every single day. Before we close, do one thing for me. Think of one person in your life whose hydrangea never blooms or always seems to be struggling. The neighbor with the big green bush that never flowers. The friend who has all but given up. Send them this video, just the link. It might be the thing that finally gives them the blooms they have been waiting years for. Now let me pull all 5 of these together, because they are not really 5 random rules. They are 3 disciplines. And once you see them that way, June stops being scary. The first discipline is placement and restraint. That is mistake 1 and mistake 2. Give the plant the right spot, morning sun and afternoon shade, and feed it lightly, because the right home and a light hand prevent half of these problems before they ever start. The second discipline is water wisdom. That is mistakes 3 and 5, and it is the single most important hydrangea skill there is. Check the soil before you water. Water deeply only when it is dry, and never ever confuse afternoon heat wilt with thirst. Master that one habit, and you shut down the disease that actually kills. The third discipline is knowing your plant. That is mistake 4. Learn whether yours blooms on old wood or new wood, and prune to that so you never again cut off the very flowers you have been waiting all year to see. Placement, water, knowing your plant. Get those right in June, and the plant rewards you with a whole summer of blooms. And listen, if you are in your 50s, 60s, or beyond, you already know a hydrangea is rarely just about the shrub. It is the big blue mophead by the porch. The bush that has bloomed every June for 20 years. The cutting you took from your mother's garden, still going. You have earned that. You have earned a yard full of those blooms, not a green bush that will not flower, and not a plant you drowned with kindness. So, subscribe if you have not yet. It is free, and it always will be. No fluff, nothing to sell you. That is a promise. Now go check your hydrangea, and before you water it, push your finger into the soil. I will see you in the next one. If this guide helps you protect your garden's most beautiful blooms and changes the way you look at your backyard, please subscribe and like the video. We are uncovering the horticultural secrets that ensure your landscape thrives for generations. Let's grow a better future together. Our next garden treasure will be revealed soon.